Hi, this is Ken and Michelle Bass.
And you're listening to the Resilient Parenting Podcast.
Thanks for joining us. We're on a journey of doing podcasting.
Yes, this is new for us and very exciting, but with anything comes a learning curve. Mm-hmm. But we're used to talking to each other, so that should be okay.
And I'm going to try to pay attention to what she says this time.
Oh, let's don't go that far. Why start now?
Yeah. Well, we want to start off with this first podcast with the people who are making all this possible. Too.
Yes, our debut. So be kind. And if you like what you hear, make sure to follow and share with your friends and family. You ready?
Well, welcome Roger Sherman, who's the Executive Director of the Idaho Children's Trust Fund, here on our podcast today. Roger, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, you're quite welcome. We've got a lot of things to talk to you about.
Good.
And questions, right? Like, first off, the Idaho Children's Trust Fund. What's the mission and the purpose of the Idaho Children's Trust Fund?
So the Idaho Children's Trust Fund was formed in 1985, and we've been around for a while. And our focus is really around prevention of child abuse and neglect before it occurs, which means to us strengthening families, helping build stronger communities that support families, and that's our overall mission.
Oh, okay.
And so how do you do that? Like, can you describe a little bit of the work that you do?
So we work statewide. So we provide funding, training, provide technical assistance, support a network of organizations throughout the state who are doing all kinds of different things. They're providing parenting training. They're creating parent support groups. We're supporting the community schools effort to turn community schools schools into more neighborhood hubs that are available to support both families and the kids in those neighborhoods. We are supporting a lot of training on child sexual abuse to ensure that people are aware of how sexual abuse occurs, and so we can prevent it in the first place.
What kind of specifics can you give us on some ways you are helping prevent child abuse, besides just the generalization there?
So really preventing child abuse upstream really means a lot of education, a lot of work. So again, like I was saying about child sexual abuse, it's important that people understand grooming. They understand boundary violations. They understand how to when they see something that they can stop it before it occurs, because there are always signs and people can look at them after, but often they don't see them in the first place unless they understand how they operate.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So can you explain a little bit about the Prevent Child Abuse America? I know that you're the Idaho chapter. So is this every state has a chapter?
Almost every state in the country has a chapter of the Prevent Child Abuse America. I don't think we're in every state yet. I think we're at 47, 48, something like that.
Oh, so close.
And Prevent Child Abuse America has been around since 1972, so it's the oldest organization focusing on preventing child abuse and neglect before it occurs. And so it's a much more, it's been around for, it's like I say, it's been around for a long time. And we became the state affiliate in 2007.
Wow.
Okay. Now, you were basically the impetus behind this podcast. Impetus, big word. I used it, yes. No.
Love it.
It's
Love
too
it,
early, Ken. It's too early.
Impetus, a great word.
I can't even spell it.
It's your brainchild, basically, and you came to us about this. Why?
Well, I think it's really important that we communicate. Like I said, a lot of this is around education. It's around helping people to, understand what they can do, because we really believe that, it's the neighbors, the friends, the community. It's not just organizations who are going to prevent child abuse and neglect. It really is going to be about, all of us doing our part to support families who are struggling. We know that abuse and neglect occur for the most part when families are under a lot of stress, and that gives us, helping to support families makes a big difference. When we have the opportunity to, help with a crying baby, for example, or, help with a little bit of, sometimes advice is useful. You have experience that, some new parents don't have, help them out with it. With a new, new babies are, new babies that cry a lot.
Right.
That's hard. It's hard. Any of us who are parents, know how difficult that is. And even if we're past that point, like I am, you can still remember it and you can still be the supportive person in their lives.
Yes, and I feel like every stage is kind of like, oh, what is this? This is a new child. And so there's lots of opportunities for learning depending on where you're at with your children. I know that the podcast, we named it the Resilient Parenting Podcast, but could you share what it means to be resilient?
So resilience is something that's built. You're not born with it, and often people say, "Oh, children are resilient," but that it isn't really enough to say that. I mean, we build resilience by having experiences, and when those experiences are supported by, especially as children, if we're supported by adults who can help us through the hard things, we grow from that. And, we actually, people used to say we bounce back and that's resilience, but I think it's really more than just bouncing back. It's really bouncing forward. It's learning from those things. Death is hard. Some forms of, all trauma is hard, and if you have to deal with, disappointment, just not getting a good grade, but somebody helps you through that process, you become more resilient. So that over years, you find yourself being able to deal with, what comes at you rather than, being crushed by it. And if you've never gotten the support from other people when you go through those hard times, everything becomes a crushing blow.
Yeah.
And I think, you're talking about children's resiliency, and I know that we're going to focus a lot of our energy on parent resiliency, because if a parent is not supported and doesn't have what they need, it's going to be really hard for them to be able to then offer support to their child. So the focus is going to be on helping the children and at the same time supporting the families that are raising the children.
Let's talk about parenting and the families themselves as far as defining families. This has been a question raised recently here in Idaho and other places too about, what are families? What makes up a family? What are traditional families? What are non-traditional families?
Yeah, I mean, families, we got to, I think, accept the reality that families come in all shapes and sizes. I mean, there are families that are, single-parent families. There are families that look like beaver cleaver families, and there are families that are multi-generational. I mean, and there's families where grandparents are taking care of children, or there's families that are blended because of, because families get, there's a divorce or there's a death, and the families,
same-sex families.
There's same-sex families,
single
families,
yeah.
And the reality is that kids can be raised well in every single one of those families.
Definitely.
And so when we talk about what's traditional, I don't even think that's a real thing, because the truth is that families were different in every generation.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
It's just, I think now we're more willing to talk about it, more aware of it.
And depending on the culture too, a lot of times in certain cultures, it's the whole family or the whole village that helps raise the children. And so I think when I think of traditional, Ken and I really are a multi-generational blended family. And I would say that we're more normal family, if you want to say normal, and our name's in the same sentence, then,
Let me write that down.
than traditional. And it's, I think we do need to change the way that we look at families and offer support and look at the unique challenges of every family, but also the strengths that every family brings.
Well, and I think it doesn't help us to judge a family, right? I mean, really, what we really want to think about when we think about family is, love, relationships. All of those things are core to, to what a family is. And if that family is raising children, it's really what kind of environment is that child getting, and if they're getting the nurture and support and stability and all of the things, safety, they're going to turn out fine. And that's what really is really important, not the structure of that family by somebody else's definition.
Exactly. So is it fair to say that if you find yourself in a parenting role, this podcast is for you?
I think you said it, Michelle. This podcast is for you.
Yeah. So you mentioned this earlier, and I just want to kind of circle back. If you have any statistics. Ooh, that's hard to say.
That's why I didn't say it.
Yeah. What was the other word you said,
Stats.
though? Oh, yes, stats. Around better outcomes when parents are supported. So you had mentioned that as one of the protective factors. Can you say anything more about how, even if you're not parenting, but you see a family that maybe you think might be struggling, how you can bring support? Obviously, this podcast is also meant to be an additional support to families. Do you have any else to add to that?
Well, I think what we know is that families that feel isolated, that are apart, that don't have support either from other family members, friends, or other people in the community, or the community in general, or programs, they tend to struggle more. And when you struggle more, the kids are going to do, are going to not do as well.
Right.
Abuse and neglect occur in situations, again, when families are under a lot of stress and they don't know how to deal with it, and they're not feeling resilient. They're not feeling able to provide that safe, stable, nurturing
They're feeling
environment.
alone. They're feeling alone in their
feel
struggle.
alone. Yeah.
So where do they turn? Back to you guys, for one thing?
Well, that would be a place, but we generally refer them to some of the organizations working on the ground. A lot of good organizations around, hopefully, that we'll talk to during this podcast, groups like Lutheran Community Services, or groups like Family Advocates in this area, or iCare and Coeur d'Alene, or organizations like we work with groups all over the state, so many, many different groups, and hopefully we'll have some opportunities as the podcast continues to talk to some of those groups around the state and on the groundwork that they're doing.
Yeah, there's lots of really great organizations that are supporting families, and all families, and when I mention families. And speaking of resources, when I was looking at your website, I noticed that you have family support resources, and you also have a section called Increase Awareness Links. So can you share a little bit about both of those, which, by the way, will be added to the website, and you can access this after our podcast today?
So we list some of the resources that are available, throughout the state for assistance when you have a new baby, for things like diapers, for all of those kinds of things. We also really encourage people to use findhelp.org, which is a website that has all the information, and you can just plug in your zip code, and when you plug in your zip code, it tells you what kinds of services are available locally.
Is that a national?
It's both there's findhelpidaho.org.
Okay.
And that's the Idaho-based one, but it is national.
Okay.
So anybody anywhere can put in anywhere in the United States.
Okay.
Can pop in their zip code, and you're looking for particular services, and it will give you that. But we encourage people to do that, so there is a more comprehensive list, but we have a good list on our website. That's a good starter.
What's your website?
Our website is www.idahochildrenstrustfund.org.
And Roger Sherman is the executive director of the Idaho Children's Trust Fund, who we've been talking with today, and we appreciate all the information coming from you. And
very excited.
I know. Anything else you want to add to this?
Well, I'm just very excited at the opportunity, to have this podcast and communicate with people around using this format, because I think this is a format that people are getting used to using. And if we can talk to the groups around the state and make it, a valuable resource, I think will be a huge contribution to the world. So I appreciate you, Michelle and Ken, for taking this on and making this thing happen.
Yeah. We are ready.
So if you're listening, spread the word about the podcast.
Yes,
and
share.
About Roger's organization, Idaho Children's Trust Fund also.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the Idaho Children's Trust Fund.